There we go. Seems like things are finally working now. All right. Let's go ahead and... All right. Yep. We're online and ready to roll. So let's go ahead and see if I can get you that link on Blackboard. Please excuse the typing noises. Most of you won't even see this part of the video. Maybe if you're watching it as an archive. That's just the way it is, I guess. Okay. Let's get all our stuff ready to go. Yep, okay. Yep, it's got to load the interface. Probably hit live a little too soon, but that's alright. There we go. Probably hit live a little too soon. Oh, streamception. Please click on this link. Okay. Alright, that should do it. Okay, let's go ahead and get things started. Load up Word, get all our good stuff going. How is everybody today? I see I have a few viewers already. Excellent. That really is good. Just wait a moment while a couple more people show up. Not going to wait too long, though. I think I've waited you enough. Or made you wait enough. What's going on here? Interesting. Sorry, guys. I seem to be having some technical problems. You would think I'd have it worked out, wouldn't you? Alright. Well, we'll just do this the old-fashioned way. Oh, la, 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 la. Uh-huh. Interesting. You know what? I'm gonna go... Hey there, everybody's here. Alright. It's word time. Sorry about that there. I haven't done this in a minute. So this is going to be our lovely Blackboard for today. And I hope you all can see. If you cannot see, go ahead and say something in chat. I have that open. I think there's a slight delay. There seems to be a slight delay I can't get rid of. So don't worry if your questions don't seem to be answered. Okay, it looks like people are able to see what's on the screen, though, so that's good. Thank you, Caroline, or Chloe. for saying that, but there's a slight delay. So if you start asking questions about stuff, and it seems like I take a minute, it's because there's just that much of a delay. That's what I was trying to figure out during all that downtime. I apologize for that. So let's go ahead and get started. Today we are kind of doing a special day where we are combining a couple of days together because I don't want to get too far off schedule. And honestly, there's really only a few things that in the listening chapter that I think are really worth talking about, and we're just going to kind of go through that, and then we're going to give you the more practical advice about outlining, and then we'll end the class at the normal time, which is 11:50-ish today. So that's the plan. One thing I do want to draw your attention to. And I'll write this here in a moment as I'm done flipping through it here. But there is a skeletal outline for your informative speech. It is on page 55 of your workbook, or should be. Here, I'm going to write this in so you actually know that I'm live. Your workbook is a skeletal outline. Line for the informative speech. Please go ahead and look that over. We are going to go over that a little bit here in class. It's really nothing all that special, but if you're looking at things about what to do and stuff, there you go. But we'll talk more about that here in a moment. So about listening. Okay, okay, Charisma. Yeah, I see your comment there. Awesome. So about listening. In your book, it goes over several different types of listening. There's like therapeutic listening. There's there's just a lot of them. But therapeutic listening, of course, is listening like you're listening to a friend. Maybe they just broke up with their significant other, and you're just kind of there to give them support, and you're processing things. The real things I wanted to talk about were the two broad types of listening, which would be active listening and passive listening. Passive listening is something that you would probably do to white noise or music. And not necessarily even music, or when listening to music to relax. You're not really letting the words kind of wash over you, or thinking about them in any way. Active listening is basically just hearing things, right? If you've heard people say things, I know you're hearing me, but you're not listening. This is the kind of listening that they are telling you you're doing. It's the passive listening kind. It's really nothing. There is a purpose to it. It's white noise is useful to help people sleep, for example. Listening to music while you work is good to kind of subconsciously give yourself maybe a tempo to whatever you're doing, but you're not really thinking about the meaning in what's being transferred. This is about thinking about meaning as the words or sounds are being perceived. All right, and this is the important part. Is this part. Ooh. Is this part. I'm going to italicize, bold, and underline it. If you're listening to somebody, or rather, if you are hearing somebody, but you're also thinking about the meaning behind their words, then that is, you're doing the active listening part. So even though you might be listening to a song, if you're really listening to the lyrics, or heck, even if it's an instrumental piece, and you're really listening for the notes, and you're listening to the emotion, or trying to get emotion out of the notes, and the tempo and all of that, the meter, you are actively listening, all right, even though there aren't any words in there, because you're trying to think about what the piece means, or you're trying to think about what the sounds mean. If you're just kind of putting on, Beethoven's Fur Elise while you're typing up your paper, you're doing the more passive listening. All right, your mind is elsewhere. You're really just trying to maybe use the subconscious effort to maybe give yourself some energy or keep you working at a steady rate or something like that. Whereas active listening is actively thinking about the meaning behind the words or sounds that you are picking up. Now, within active listening, there's a couple of different kinds of active listening that are particularly important. Um, Now, of course, we talked about therapeutic listening. That's I'll go ahead and write it down. Why not? Um, listening for sympathy, to provide sympathy or empathy. And again, there's a difference between sympathy and empathy. Empathy means you can feel what the other person is feeling, and sympathy is kind of like you can kind of imagine it. Um, so, like when people say something like "I don't want your sympathy," what they're really saying is, not just "I don't want your pity," but they also don't want you to try to stop imagining what they must be going through, right? They're basically saying what I am experiencing is so far outside your experience. I don't want you to thinking about it, or trying to bond with me in this particular way. It's just kind of insulting to the experience that I've had. Which is why when somebody says that to you, I don't want your sympathy. You should probably stop whatever behavior it is that you're doing. But in any case, sometimes you need to therapeutically listen. That's a very minor kind. The two more important kinds, I'm going to bold these to emphasize their importance, are listening for comprehension. And so that's the first one we'll kind of go over here. Um, active listening to the Wendy's commercial. Yes. Oh, if we can only slap in some Wendy's jokes here and there, that'll be great. Um, so yeah, listening for comprehension. This is again, it's a kind of active listening where you are trying um, to comprehend the intended meaning of the message. This is what we do in here during speeches as an audience. And of course, technically, this is what you're doing now, right? You're trying to listen to the words coming out of your YouTube and your headphones or speakers or whatnot, and trying to figure out what I'm trying to communicate to you. What is Mr. Pike's intended meaning here? And again, active listening is just thinking about meaning. Listening for comprehension is specifically to try to, well, comprehend or figure out the intention or the real message. Maybe I can put listening for the real message. All right. That's what you're trying to do. The other kind of listening that's important for us to think about is listening for evaluation. All right. Now this is actually what I do during speeches. This is where you're listening with the idea to critique or otherwise evaluate, form judgments about the sound or the speech patterns or the speech. All right, this is what I do, and at some point, you are also going to get some practice doing this. And in order to listen for evaluation, there's really two different kind of mindsets available, and this is why I want to talk about these two in particular. When you're listening for comprehension, you might listen to keywords, which would include things like dates, names, places, things like that. You might also be thinking. You might ask yourself questions, whether you think of it like this or not, but your brain is probably doing something like, how does this information connect with what I already know? Right? So your brain, whether you're doing this explicitly or not, you're doing this process if you're in a mode for listening for comprehension. How does this information connect with what I already know is really the kind of one of the key things. And the like dates, names, places, statistics, numbers, those kinds of things you're paying really close attention to, or those things really grab your attention when you're in this mode. When you're listening for evaluation, the mindset is very different. You're not listening for keywords so much as you are checking for culturally bound, and we're going to get in the weeds here, culturally bound performance standards. So, for example, in American culture, it is normal for a confident speaker to occasionally look up from his or her notes and look at the audience in their eyes, right? We take that as a sign of competence and confidence, right? Um, so this would be something that I'm doing. I'm checking for these things. So things, again, like eye contact, um, vocal quality, like does he sound like he's very assertive, or maybe like I was mumbling before when I was trying to work through my little trying to figure out what the delay, why the delay was happening, and why I couldn't pull up something on my computer and have it display immediately in the video preview. You heard me mumbling there, right? That's part of vocal quality. We can also technically call that volume. We haven't really talked about the aspects of delivery yet, but these are all kind of words we'll dive into a bit later. But you're paying attention to stuff like that. Does this person sound confident according to my culturally bound beliefs about that idea? Um, so, movement and let's see what else we associate with confidence. There we go. Lack of verbal pauses like uhs and ums, right? So when we're listening for evaluation, we're checking for culturally bound performance standards. We're not actually listening to dates, names, places, statistics, and numbers. We're not really trying to understand the message. What we're really trying to do is check, does your performance fit what I have come to expect based on my raising in this particular culture and context? Are you performing with the expectation, right? Which is often different. Now, of course, because this is an academic class, we're not just checking those things. We're also checking for, do you list off your citations? But that really is like a checkbox in itself, right? Listening for assignment details. And then, of course, here's the thinking process behind this mode as well. This is regardless of whether you're thinking it explicitly or not. Um, Listening for evaluation on the horrible quality of the White Castle commercial. And Travis, you hit it right there. You are thinking about how does the quality or qualities of this performance compare with what I have seen before and thought was good. I'm going to put some quotes in there. I think that's grammatically correct, right? With the extra little one dealy bobbers here. You're asking yourself, it's really a comparative type process. Okay, you're checking the person against your culture, what you expect out of them in that situation in terms of like confidence and competence. But you're also, you are probably, because this is a class, especially me, I'm going to be checking to see if you have the required number of citations and things. Oftentimes in an unstructured environment where you're just giving a presentation on what you know, they're not doing that. But everybody is still kind of thinking, if you're being evaluated, that is, how does your quality of this presentation, of this performance, compare with what I have seen before and thought was good? And as you can tell, like that idea, like that's very personal. What I have seen before, right? Or alternatively, maybe what do I expect from a performance like this? Would be maybe another one, because maybe a college student giving his or her first demonstration speech isn't going to hit all of the performances for what was the best speech I've ever seen. Huh. That's a surprisingly tricky question. But in any case, it was a professional speaker at a professional event, let's put it that way, with years of motivational speaking experience. One of those type experiences. A student's not going to hit that, right? So do I start everybody off at D's? Because they fell short of that? Well, not really, because that's not a reasonable person either. But you do have maybe an expectation, again, culturally bound, based on what you've seen before out of this maybe particular group that you're evaluating. And that's how you're doing this comparison. And that's one thing, I commented on your demonstration speeches especially, was that, hey, this was actually a very good group. All right. So even though, and on one hand, I don't want everybody to think that I'm just an easy grader, but on the other hand, I was doing that comparison between you guys and the past groups. I can't help but do it. Um, and I compared you to the assignment. I compared you to, which you all did stellar on, and then I compared you to what I've seen before, and I could tell you if we were in class, I was going to do a little pantomime story, but there is a guy who he forgot all of his material, and so he decided to make like a tuna salad sandwich, and he just happened to have like a can of tuna salad and some pieces of bread in his backpack because they were his lunch. He didn't have any tools to spread the stuff though in the classroom, so he used his phone. So I know that's kind of ruining the punchline there that I could have given you, but it was one of those kinds of speeches, and that was like it was an honors section. It was in the middle of the day, kind of like just like yours, but I was seeing a lot of speeches of that quality. And I think when you compare yourself, I think when you compare yourselves and that of your classmates to that kind of presentation, you'd realize that wow, we actually darn did good. So I'm very impressed with you all as a group, I guess is what I'm saying. And I got to that conclusion because I was in the frame set for listening for evaluation, thinking about all these things, even if I wasn't explicitly saying. Randy says innovative. Yes, very innovative. Even though I wasn't really saying or thinking, how does Randy's performance with this video that she synchronized to her speech, how does this compare to the tuna salad sandwich? I wasn't thinking about that explicitly, but the reality is that as I was in listening for evaluation mode, I had done that process, and I was, very impressed with what Randy had done and what all of you had ended up doing, depending on my past experience. So there you go. Those are the two really big kinds of listening that we need to pay attention to here, and just remember that they have very different sets, frames of mind. One, you're primarily thinking, how does this information connect to information that I already know? And evaluation, which is, what qualities of this performance in terms of like eye contact, vocal quality, volume, movement, other aspects of competence that we have inherited from our culture. How does that compare to what I think should be happening? How does this compare to what I've seen before? Yeah, after class, Charisma, he was washing his phone pretty thoroughly in the water, which was probably not a great idea. Especially this was like I want to say this was maybe 2014 where this was happening. So the phones weren't quite as durable. They have a lot of sealed phones now, and these were maybe that would have been like a third generation iPhone maybe. Which were just notorious, for getting water, and you had all these tricks about putting the phone, if you got wet, you had to put it in like a bag of rice and stuff. So he was, I'm guessing he was out of a phone for quite a while. In any case, those were the frames of mind for those two different types of listening. So now let's pivot in our final few moments, because it really only takes a few moments to do this. Let's talk about outlining. There's a couple of just rules for outlining that you need to follow. I'm going to call them outlining rules. I'm going to put rules in quotation marks because part of what we do is, if we were in high school, this would be a language arts class. So this is, again, an art more than a science. But there is still a structure to it that, like everything in here, when you're thinking about meaning, there's a certain structure to outlines that convey meaning. And so if you have the wrong thing in the wrong area, the meaning gets kind of mixed up, right? And you don't want to do that. But outside of these rules or outside of these expectations for what an outline should look like, it's really up to your best judgment, what you feel looks good, what you feel you can use best in your presentation. So let's go ahead and talk about these outlining rules. And a great example, again, will be on the skeletal outline for your informative speech, back on page 55 of your workbook, or close to there if you have a different edition than mine. So let's go ahead and talk about. One is that you should have a title, and this should be at the top. All right, at the top of your page. People ask, does it need to be centered? Does it need to be on the left side or the right side? Now, the example in your book is on the right and on the left-hand side. It doesn't really matter. But it should be at the very tippy top of your page, first thing. and title your presentation. As you can see, like this one I'm giving right now on YouTube, even though I don't expect anyone other than the 12 people in here to watch it, maybe a couple of fiddly bits from the classroom that will see this later, is Comm 210 Snow Day Makeup, February 1st. And that just kind of lets people know, the title just kind of lets people know that it's an organized presentation. And when I say people, I mean eventually I'm not going to be the only person that sees these. Eventually we are going to share these with the group. So you want people to know that you've thought this thing through. You're not just winging it. You've come up with your content, your intro, your conclusion, and you've thought about what would be a good thing to call this work that you've put together. Even though your work is a performance, you should still title it. Okay? That's my little rant there. And then you have a general purpose. And your general purpose is really going to be this simple as either to inform or to persuade. Now, of course, these are informative speeches, so we can kind of... I wonder how you do that strike-through thingy. I never learned how to do the strike-through thingy. But just imagine that I did a strike-through thingy here. Right? For this speech, your general purpose is given to you. It's to inform, but you can also persuade. All right. So, and that also is important for people to know, because you intend that by doing this, by writing, general purpose : to perform, right underneath your title, it lets you know your intent is to inform people. Which would be different from persuading them, which would mean to change their ideas or behavior. So if, as you go through your speech, or they go through your outline or your notes, and they realize that your general purpose was to inform, but they're getting this heavy vibe, like you're trying to change their minds about something, that's good feedback for you. They should say, hey, who's someone I haven't picked on yet? Hey, Bailey, your speech about Wendy's and its history isn't really about Wendy's history. It's about how you think it compares to the history of McDonald's and why you think Wendy's is better. And that's not really informative, that's persuasive, because you want the audience... It seems like, based on the other things that you say, it seems like you want people to make a judgment about about Wendy's versus McDonald's. And that's not an informative speech. So it's important to record that so that people know what you intended to do, in case they continue to read and they're like, oh, well, that's not the vibe I'm getting. I don't know how else to describe it but vibe. But we'll kind of see that as the semester goes on. Then you have a specific purpose. Now, this often takes the form of a thesis. All right, this often takes the form of a thesis, which you'll see later in the outline as well as being something that you actually say out loud. But this is something that you're still recording in like the front matter top part of the... This is all top part stuff. Here, I'm going to write that down. Top part stuff. Stuff you would never read aloud. All right. And that would be, your specific purpose would be, I want to inform my audience about the illustrious history of Wendy's. All right. And that would also probably appear again in your thesis statement that's just slightly worded, because instead of referring to my audience, right, you would refer to, I want to inform y'all about the illustrious history of Wendy's. Yeah, bring down the White Castle. All right. And then after this front part, this is really kind of the only stuff that's changing between the outlines that you had to do for the first speech and these outlines. After that, you're now entering the stuff you need to say territory. And this would include your introduction and its 5 parts. All right, and they've all been, I've listed these out, I think, like twice now. So we're just going to just breeze past it. You need your attention getter. You need your thesis statement. Again, you can just kind of reword your specific purpose. so that it includes the audience or addresses the audience instead of, this weird, third person. You would never stand in front of a group and say, all right, guys, I'm going to inform my class about outlining. That doesn't make sense. But you would, thesis, you just reword your specific state purpose so that it sounds right. And there you go. My audience goes to y'all, and that's about the only change I need to make. So then you have, again, your statement of importance. And this is where sometimes people get mixed up, because the statement of importance suddenly becomes your thesis. And this is something I want you to avoid, and why I'm belaboring this introduction part, and then we're just going to kind of conclude with the conclusion. You don't want your statement of importance to become your thesis, and that's what your goal of the presentation becomes, right? You could just say something simply like, Wendy's is a huge franchise, and I think your lives would be enriched if you knew how they got so big. So you're not spending the entire speech. It's pretty clear when you say this statement, like, you're not trying to convince us that it is big, or you're trying to convince us that Wendy's, anyway, is worth going to. You're just saying, I feel like this information has value. My purpose is still to give you that information. Full stop, end. And then, of course, we have your statement of credibility. All right. So there's a fully fleshed out introduction. You've done one of these at least before. Maybe the only thing that's maybe different is that, again, being really aware of keeping your thesis and statement of importance, separate. Otherwise, you will probably wind up with a persuasive speech, and one of your peers or I will give you feedback that it wasn't quite right. And then now we move on to the conclusion. Because remember, these are the two parts of this speech that are especially important, and I also realize that it's 11:51, and I'm just going to kind of wrap up by reminding you that there's a summary of main points. It sets the mood, usually by referring to the attention getter. And then, of course, gives you some kind of closing statement that ends the speech, gives a sense of closure. And again, usually these two jobs, like this 1 and 2, these two jobs here are done at the same time. All right. Usually that can be, one statement, just as long as it happens. And that's that. So you can see there's a fair amount of review in there, but just again adding a bit of nuance for this particular informative speech. Travis Johnson with your Captain Planet. I've got to find a way to work that into some kind of a lecture. I've worked in Star Trek before. I'll have to see if I can find some good Captain Planet references within our book. Well, things that can be interpreted with a certain mindset that they mean Captain Planet. In any case, that's it, folks. I am a dunzo. Does anyone have any questions? Now, I want to remind everybody that we do have an active speech assignment. I think I actually said, hey, we'll talk about topics. Actually, I think we're going to talk about them on Monday, right? So really, and this is really what I am trying to announce here, is that I don't believe you should... I'm flipping through my book here. Yeah, we still have another week where we're going to talk about delivery. We're going to have to talk about audience analysis another time. Simply because I did want to get you that information about listening. So here's our big announcement then. So 2 of them. And I'm going to put all this stuff on Blackboard. There will be a quiz on Monday over listening and the functions of intro and conclusion. Also on Monday, have a topic, or even better, a specific purpose for your informative speech. when class starts. I will go around the room like we did before and just kind of ask you what you're thinking. Um, Again, if your topic is not the kind that you would, um, you know, want to say in public, maybe that's a sign that you shouldn't do it. Because if you're going to be like, all right, this is one reason why I've changed from like having you people. Man, I must think so poorly of students. Um, having students submit things to me through a back channel like Blackboard or email. I told you that incident when somebody was like, "Hey, can I do famous murderers?" And I thought he said like famous murderers, like he was just going to kind of talk about, like the most famous serial killers in America, and it'll just be kind of weird and creepy for Halloween. Instead, he like actually was going to talk about like the actual events and some pictures from there. But anyway, so yeah, that's why I do it also in public. So if you're thinking like, oh, I don't know if I want to give my specific purpose in public at this stage of development, then it's probably your topic probably is maybe not quite so appropriate. But again, you can do controversial things. So if you want to do, you know, the purpose of this, my specific purpose for this presentation is to inform everybody about the benefits of the previous border fence that President Bush built. There you go. That would be perfectly acceptable. Even though it might be controversial given, maybe the attitudes or the stereotypical attitudes of the youth about the border wall that's being proposed. So, that kind of stuff is okay. But if you're really thinking that people may not appreciate looking at scenes of, mayhem and carnage, maybe don't expose us to that. Your question is, who's your favorite student? Oh, Chloe, I don't have a favorite student yet. Maybe someday, far in the future. Long after everyone here is gone. But I don't see any other questions, and I kind of rambled over it. I think I gave you enough time to kind of ask, maybe, by going over the announcement there. So I'm going to go ahead and call us a class session. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If your friends are wondering where this video is, please direct them to the link on Blackboard, and they can watch basically the whole thing, even though the stream's off. So it's just going to play an archival version where they can't really interact, but all the information will be there for them. So thank you so much with that, and thank you for your flexibility. Have a great Friday. Stay safe now, okay?